Well, welcome to session 1 of Beginning Life Together in the Doing Life Together series. This first session is titled The Goal of Life. My name is Brett Eastman, and I'm going to do my best to be your host for the leadership lifters in this study. I can remember 20 years ago getting in my first small group as a seeker. I was lost as a goose. And I've had the privilege of being in groups ever since that time. And even just last night, my small group called me and was praying for this particular project. I love seeing people gather in community to grow in their walk with God. But a couple things I want to say to you right as you begin. Number one is thanks. Thanks for taking a huge risk and getting into a study that we believe is possibly a revolutionary new approach to doing small groups. And number two, don't panic. Now you say, Brett, don't panic. What are you talking about? Well, I just want to say, whether you are a brand new leader or whether you've been leading a group for a while considering this curriculum, I think it's going to be okay. Between this leadership lifter and the segment on the disc called Leaders Watch Me First, which you could go back and take a look at it, we hope you'll know exactly what you need to do each step of the way. The 6 sessions of this study are going to help your group start experiencing the 5 biblical purposes that God has given to each member of His family. Over the course of the next year, what could be the additional 36 sessions, we will give you 6 weeks on each individual purpose that God has given for us to know deep within our hearts. This first session is going to be kind of like a warm-up, a test drive to the entire Doing Life Together series. I'd like you to hear now from Chip Ingram, the president of Walk Through the Bible, who'll be your teacher for this session, and what he hopes your group is going to get out of this first study together.
The one thing, if there's just one takeaway, I would pray that people would have a paradigm collision. I would pray that they would be driving home in the car with one another, husband and wife, or a couple single guys, or single girls, or people who came as a date, or alone in that car driving going, I think I've missed the boat. I think I've missed the boat. I mean, even Christians. You know, I hope they will say, my lands, I've unconsciously fallen into thinking. It was reading my Bible, praying, going to church, learning to give. I've been on an activity trail. God is going to measure my relationship with Him. That's where it's at. And the way I test that is how I love other people. I pray that they literally bang up against the reality of Matthew 22, 37 to 39 and realize I've got to rethink my whole relationship with God and how I live.
Now, a few thoughts for you to keep in mind as you begin this session. First, if your group is new, or if any new people join your group, your top priority is to make those people feel welcome. Many people who visit new groups, they just don't return because they don't feel like people care, because there's like cliques that they just can't crash into. So when the people walk in that night, make sure you greet them at the door. Don't be off studying or preparing your material, getting refreshments set. Be ready to give them a handshake, to give them a hug, or maybe at least just give them a high five. You want to look them in the eye when you talk to them and welcome them. And then as your meeting starts, ask everyone to introduce themselves briefly. That'll make them feel like they get to know everybody and it's like they're not feeling left out. But question 1 of the study is an icebreaker or a mixer to be able to help people tell a little bit about themselves and really have some fun together. I think you're going to enjoy this. It's worth taking time for this kind of thing in the first week, even if your Bible study needs to be shortened just a little bit. Might be good also to have one person call those people that are new just to make sure they felt connected. Some of you may have seekers in your groups, which is a wonderful new thing that is happening. And this kind of a group with a teacher coming in on video is a great way to be able to help. They don't even know if they want to believe in Jesus, let alone be in your group. So you just want to be sensitive to these folks. My wife and I invited a gal in our neighborhood to a group here recently. When we walked in the door, she sat down and everybody kind of loved on her a little bit, but I asked her, how you feeling? How you doing? She said, fine, a little nervous. And they passed out drinks and said, would you like one? And she said, yeah, I'd like a scotch if you can get me one. But she did feel loved by the end of the night, and she continued on in the series with us just because of how people responded to her. So talk to them about something other than church. Avoid putting them on the spot for things like prayer or even reading in the Bible. Second, a very important item in this first session is the purpose-driven group agreement. You can find this on pages 61 and 62 of your study guide. And you might want to turn there right now, even as you're listening, to look through the different elements on the agreement. At Saddleback and at Willow and even with Campus Crusade when I was in college, we found that groups that talk about these values up front and commit to a kind of a common agreement amongst them benefit significantly over time. They work through conflicts way before people get to the point of frustration of why are we doing it this way or why do we have to talk about these things. It just helps, and it helps eliminate a lot of pain later. Sometimes I say with this one, it's either pay me now or pay me later. Take some time with this agreement up front. All you need to do in your meeting is to read the agreement out loud. Walk straight through it with the entire group. And if some people have concerns about a specific item or agreement as a whole, just be sensitive to their questions and kind of dialogue about it. You might want to add a few things as they would say, but be clear about where you're trying to go as a group right up front. One idea that is distinct to the Doing Life Together series is a principle that we call rotating leaders. Rotating leaders is simply an attempt to try to help share the ownership of the group with multiple members and to help to try to recognize that healthy groups, we believe, rotate the leadership on a regular basis. Now, all you need to do is to take a few minutes at the end of your meeting to fill out your small group calendar. You'll find it on page 63 of your study guide. This is like a snack list for a soccer team or a Girl Scout troop where everybody kind of takes their role in the game. That each person sees that they might host it in their home, that each person sees that they might be able to help lead the study. And certainly over time, each person begins to share a greater ownership of the group. The fourth item that I want to call your attention to is the open chair exercise in question number 12. Now make a point in at least your first two meetings of emphasizing this particular principle. Think about it. You got into this group because somebody tapped on your shoulder. And I think back in my own life of John and Steve and a guy named Dave that reached out to me over 20 years ago. I wouldn't be standing here today and you wouldn't be listening to this videotape or this DVD if somebody didn't do that with you. So please, share that vision with your group. Jesus was the one who tapped on the 12, and the 12 tapped on others, and over time, on down the line, it came to you and me. He had a dream, Jesus himself, that every person would have a circle of people who would care for them and draw them into the maturity of their own faith. So think ahead of time about one or two people that you could invite to the group yourself. And then when you pull the group together, share those names with your group and what you're planning on doing. See, the principle of this is that people are going to do more, not what you say, but what you model and what you do before them. The open chair is a great place to start because groups that use it gain strength from new blood and new folks in your group. And I'm not talking about a revolving door. I'm talking about creating something that is not a stagnant pond, but a slow trickling stream of bringing and sending people in the context of your group. This was Jesus' dream, not ours. It's not a program or a system or a strategy. It is his heart to try to welcome a few people into the fold. Now, Chip has one last thought to share with you about what you might be able to do to really bring this session to life.
If there is one thing I want to warn, I'm a small group leader. You're a small group leader. Here's one thing don't do. I nearly killed myself leading a small group. And then, my small groups multiplied and I'm a pastor, but it's the same exact deal. I would get up early and I knew I had to spend time with God. And I knew I needed good time with my wife and my kids and then my job. And what I ended up doing is I just burnt the candle at both ends. I got where I little sleep. I'm calling everybody. I'm running around like crazy. And don't burn out. Don't kill yourself. And at the heart of it, and this is hard to admit, there's a lot of grandiosity. There's a lot of me thinking I was so important if I didn't make the call, if I didn't follow up on everything. And I literally almost went in the hospital. And what I learned was the moment I had those big needs, everyone jumped up and wanted to help. And I realized they all wanted to help the whole time. And I finally got to where I said, hey, could you make a couple calls? This guy's hurting. You have a good discussion in a group. If any two brain cells are working, you got 4 people that are really hurting. If you think you got to handle all 4, you're dead. Don't do it all. Say to one of those other people, could you handle these 2? I'll handle those 2. Spread it out. Pace yourself. Let God work.
As we wrap this session up, I want to thank you so much for your willingness to take a huge step of faith and to lead this group. Remember that when Moses himself was scared to go off and lead Israel, God shared with him and spoke right to his heart and said, please, even though you're saying, don't send me, unless you're going to go too, God said to him, I will I will do the very thing that you have asked because I am pleased with you. And I know you, Moses. I know you by name. Just remember God knows you by name, along with every one of the members in your group, and anticipate, even now, prayerfully before God, what He's going to do in your group in this session.